Hey everybody, it is Romania Black, and we are on episode 5 of the Millionaire Detective Balance Unlimited. And we've got an 11 episode series, so we're right about the halfway point. Between this episode and next episode is going to be about halfway, which feels about right because last episode we kind of rounded out getting to know Daisuke and Haru, getting to know their characters, knowing their past a little bit about their family or their living situations, just enough info that we need to kind of connect to the next act of the story, which is going to be starting, I assume, with this one. So I'm very curious to see what all we're going to get from these episodes now that we've been introduced to the characters properly and we've got their dynamic set up. I'm really excited, but I do have some comments that I want to get to before we start. First, Lou talks about how Daisuke had basically given some looks to Suzui back in episode 2 that he seemed kind of disapproving of. And so with this last episode and him running away from home, it kind of seems like maybe he feels overwhelmed by his relatives and he just kind of wants to like go do his own thing, which is kind of maybe why he went to the Modern Crimes Division, because he didn't want to be overwhelmed with people trying to oversee him and telling him what to do. Maybe. I think that might be part of it. We'll see. But Tony Simi talked about how in episode 2 as well, the game being played was called Manzai, and it involves fast revolving jokes concerning a misunderstanding, and the bokeh, or the idiot, is often one that gets struck in the head by the character called the Tsukomi. So I was like, okay, cool, kind of giving some cultural information about the game that they're playing in episode 2 when they're trying to find the information on the drug dealers. Fun times. Whoosh and Sweebian talks about how the hostage in episode 3 is played by Murase Ayumu, aka Hinata from Haikyuu, and I was like, I didn't recognize that voice upon first watch, but going back, I'm like, oh yeah, you can kind of tell a little bit. Fun times. And then also, in the ED, apparently, Daisuke and Haru are handcuffed together. And I went back and looked at the ED. There is a shot right at the very end. It's almost halfway covered up, but they are connected together with the handcuffs. Fun times. Bloody Red Fox talks about how Daisuke and Haru are kind of like Dazai and Chuya from Bungo Stray Dogs. They do have that kind of tsundere, like, oh, I don't like you, but I kind of secretly like you sort of vibe to them. I could see that. Anime Annie talks about how it's pronounced Hushk. Hushk is the system that Daisuke uses, Hushk. And the VA for Takai the Chief is the same as Stark from Bleach, which I freaking love Stark. As well as Fukuzawa from Bungo Stray Dogs. Didn't know they shared the same voice actor. And Jurgens from Monsters. So fun times! Fun times with that voice actor for Takai the Chief. And then K.A. talks about how Suzui's VA is also married to the voice actor that plays Momo and Murasaki Bara in Kuroko's Basketball. And I was like, oh, that's cool. What a fun connection. I love when voice actors are married. And also the voice actor for Suzui plays the voice for Ciel from Black Butler. And I was like, I knew Ciel's voice actor was a woman, but that's awesome to know. I did want to make note, Anime Annie had talked about there being a connection between the show that Haru and Daisuke were watching in his apartment, the show, and the fact that there's a connection between the chief and Suzui being these like overbearing cops, and the fact that the one cop gets shot, the dog ends up dying as well in the series. And I was like, okay, I can kind of see that connection. That's interesting to make. I'll take it. But yeah, I'm really excited for this episode. I hope you all are as well. But a real quick shout out on Patreon. We have a bunch of philanthropy tier patrons for this month that I'm super grateful for. I'm grateful to everybody on YouTube and Patreon for supporting me and giving comments and feedback about the shows. It really makes it a much more enjoyable experience watching the series, this one especially, because there's been so many great comments about the stuff happening week to week. But I want to give a special shout out, as per the philanthropy tier, to these patrons who go above and beyond, being Edgar, being Anime Annie, being Dana, being Tyrone, Nameless Monster, Be Happy, Shimoyama, Eric, Sunspots, Translucent Min, Alex Cornejo, Librarian of Lang, Kuba Lutek, as well as Isabel, Truck, Lou Genesis, and Kiri. Thank you all so much for everything that you guys do. I really appreciate all the support. And of course, all of my love. So yeah, I'm really excited, y'all. I'm going to turn this lamp up just a hair, but I'm really excited to see what we get this episode. I hope you all are too. We're starting, I'm assuming, a new arc, so what could we be given by Daisuke and Haru? We'll just have to see, won't we? And so we're going to start episode 5 of Ye Old Millionaire Detective. I'm going to turn this mic off, and we're going to do that here in 3, 2, 1, and let's do this. Ho, 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 ho. So this just got interesting. I was like, wait a minute, what are we doing? What? This just got super interesting, and I'm all here for it, and so we need to talk about it, obviously. I was like, okay, show, you've reeled me in with Daisuke and Haru's characters. I'm all on board with their characters now. Now you're reeling me in with this story because there's some things we're finding out about Daisuke that even Daisuke wasn't so sure about, that's all starting to, there's some interesting things behind the scenes in this episode. And so I wanted to bring Whiteboard Kun out because I feel like he is needed. I don't know if we've had Whiteboard Kun on this series yet, but if not, this is Whiteboard Kun. He is my assistant in explaining all things. And I felt like it was needed because I felt like there was a lot of exposition just thrown at us in this episode. I'm glad that the key, for a second I thought the star key was like some kind of symbolic representation of the indigenous people. Wasn't too far off. The one guy was the terrorist that was acting on behalf of his people. But then the other guy, that was just a janitor, he just had the key duplicated because he wanted to go and like jack off in there. And I was like, oh my God! I was like, I'm glad some form of boys' love has helped us in this episode. But man, Haru just opening up that door and rescuing Daisuke at the last minute. Shut up. Shut up. I didn't think it was going to happen. I was like, something bad's going to happen. But we need to go back through this episode because there is quite a lot. So there's a lot underneath the surface, and it took me a second to remember that the one guy that looks like Watson is the leader of the modern crime group, right? And he's always behind his desk modeling his little ship, so I forget what he looks like when he's standing up. But there's some stuff going on under the surface. We need to talk about this because they start out the episode, he's in the elevator with the girl. And she says, thank you for the meal the other day. And he's like, oh, no problem. How about some sushi and ginza next time? Like he's flirting with the police officer, which is, you know, fine, I guess, to an extent. But we have the modern crimes division. And we have the leader of it, the chief. I guess we'll put the chief of that division. And so he's been known to take out to lunch a female from other division members. So he's taking out female leaders from other divisions at least, and talks about going out to eat with them again. And she's like, oh, that sounds kind of shady. Like that was a one-time deal. And he's like, oh, it's fine. It's completely harmless. Like whenever someone has to tell you that it's completely harmless, that means it's not completely harmless. It's like when someone says, I'm not a racist, but, and you're just like, hold on. So it's like whenever you have to say that, it's probably a sign that there's something wrong. And so he's going down. They're going down from the top floor, which is interesting, right? And she ends up leaving. And then in comes the chief. And we don't know it's the chief at first, right? And they talk about this and saying, sorry about our rascal causing a riot the other day. And he says, oh no, by the way, regarding that case, they want the modern crimes to come as well. So, okay. They say, so he apologizes for their rascal, which I'm assuming is referring to Haru or Daisuke, right? So then we get the first division on it, right? And the first division, he tells them that they know about the case. Regarding this case, it says they want modern crimes as well. Well, why? That was kind of my whole thing throughout the entire thing, was why get the modern crimes involved in the first place? Because they really had nothing to do. They were actually the reason that the whole thing went under, was because modern crimes was there. So were they banking on that? I just got really shady vibes from the first division and modern crimes leader this episode, the chief from there too. I got some shady vibes, so I wanted to go back through the dialogue here because I'm like, wait a minute. Because he said they want modern crimes to come out as well. And the chief doesn't seem very enthused about that. And he says, we'll try not to get in your way. So the question is, he's like, that's what I'd like to wish for. Don't get in our way. So I'm like, okay, was the first division, that's the question is, was the first division in on the assassination of, we have President Alvarez? Were they in on it? Were they in on this and they knew exactly what was going on and what was going to happen? And then Modern Crimes got put in on it too. So my whole thing was like, why would Modern Crimes be needed? Because they didn't really even do anything. But here was the thing. I'll get in on this. Modern Crimes includes the old man. The old man too, who conveniently doesn't go. Conveniently, the chief tells the old man not to go. He's like, oh, this could be dangerous. You don't need to go. You're close to retirement. Why tell him that? He's in the crime division. He knows the job was dangerous when he took it, unless it was an opportunity to say, okay, Modern Crimes has to be put on this, so they have to attend and show up. But the old man, if I tell him he doesn't have to, he's not going to. Was the old man responsible? Was he responsible for the communication hack? Because he seems to know the technology, right? And Daisuke notices that at the very end too, that he seems to know the technology. So what could have happened was that they, the higher-ups, were like, okay, First Division's going to run this case where we assassinate the president to keep him from building this project, you know, the giant dam project. We're going to assassinate him, get him out of the picture, which I'm sure Haru would very much object if he found out the First Division was involved in like an assassination attempt. He'd be like, wait, what? So they planned, my theory is at this moment, they planned this. Modern Crimes had to be involved because the man that knew the tech had to be involved. Plus, it would look suspicious if only the old man went and not everybody else. So everybody else was just supposed to camp out and do nothing. They knew that Daisuke had connections with President Alvarez, so he was going to attend as a different capacity as a third party. So the old man wasn't going to go show up and run reconnaissance on the communication equipment. I'm convinced, right, that he's a sleeper agent. So this giant dam project, okay. So we have Alvarez and the giant dam that is literally 300 billion yen estimated. Okay, he's arrived in Japan from the Republic of Poliador, if that's even a thing. And so, of course, as per usual in this series, and as I find from Neon Genesis and other series, they just have extra information playing in the background that, you know, is central to the entire series. The objective for this visit is to concern the large dam construction project. But since the region of the dam will submerge, has prehistoric ruins of indigenous people. So that's the thing. It's the classic, we're just shitting on the indigenous people routine. You know, like most sad things happening go. So we have this prehistoric indigenous ruins that will be submerged. Yeah, so that's the issue, is that it's going to destroy these people's, you know, sacred family burial grounds, and we don't need to do that. And so that's when the chief comes in and says, we've been assigned security for this thing. I like that they were assigned security. They did jack shit. Like, they just sat outside and had ramen. I was like, what we doing? There was no need for security. I like that Kamai is even like, they're talking about it being a target of terrorism. Isn't this kind of a little bit too much for this? We're not looking for like Amber Alerts in this case. This seems like it's a little bit much. And he said, oh, it's going to be all right. It's just for one day, and we'll be working with the First Division, which Kanbei's there. And then Haru's like, well, they just want more people there for security measures, right? He says, I'm counting on all of you. And that's when the old man says, oh, I'll go too. And he's like, oh, Cho-san, you're off duty tomorrow, aren't you? It's fine. It's all right. You don't have to strain yourself. Yeah, you're almost at retirement age. Okay, this was a weird move, right? Because Cho-san, the old man, Cho-san was off the next day. Why bring it up? Why even bring it up? You already had the day off. just don't go. And then if they ask where Cho is, they could be like, oh, he had the day off. He wasn't going to show up. But drawing attention to it, I'm like, I don't know if they drew attention to it to be the clue that we, the audience, will need later to connect the dots with him. I don't know. But I was just like, what? It's like, hold on. That seems weird. And I'm with Daisuke in this moment. He's just kind of like, why are we talking about this? This seems rather interesting. Okay. So we have our characters here. I will get the name of the one guy with the uppercut that likes the horse racing, that he's just standing there. I love the girl that has the spicy chocolate, the holy love. She's like, do you want some? The fall hotly in love chocolate, hot pepper chocolate. Girl, love her. Never change, girl. She's actually the reason why they find the extra key, so good for her. She's like, haven't you seen commercial? And she just remembers the little jingle. She's precious. I love her. Her and Kamai's outfits match. They should totally date. It's cute. Kamai, you're missing the golden opportunity. She's a keeper. So then we have Hoshino and this one guy that looks like, he looks like he's from Hunter x Hunter. He has the glasses, not Kurapika, but the other one, Lorio. I forget his name. But yeah, Lorio. Leorio. You guys will comment down below which one it is. He looks like him from Hunter x Hunter, but he also looks pretentious as hell. Like, Hoshino at least is like, he's just tsundere. This other guy looks like a prick. He's just like, oh, look, he's like Hoshino. He's like, this isn't a field trip. It's like, well, you're not letting them do it. That's kind of my issue with the first division. They get so snooty with the modern crimes group, and they're like, oh, this isn't a field trip. Like, oh, whatever. I'm like, you won't let them do anything else. You won't give them any information. What do you want them to do? Just stand there like wallpaper? Get off of their backs, dude. He says, please do not get in our way. I'm like, they just basically walked up to like stick their nose in there. I like that the one guy's like, we're not even here because we want to be. And then Kanbei, of course, he shows up. I love that Kanbei like shows up looking dapper as hell. They comment about Alvarez. They're like, is Alvarez doing this project with the dam for the good of the country or just to line his own pockets? And I think we all know the answer to that question. It's likely to line his own pockets, and if the country benefits from it, kudos to that. But yeah, then Kanbei shows up in the fancy limo, looking like $1 million, has the triple pocket square, the fancy shades. I love that. And I love that Haru is the one that's like, oh, and then Kamei is like, oh, he looks sharp. And then that's when she says, oh my God. That's when she says, I think I might have a crush. And the funny thing is that she says she might have a crush. And Haru, for a second, like, looks over to her like, not you too. I love that Haru looks over to her like, no, you can't have a crush on Kanbei. Only I can. I was like, don't worry. Don't worry, Haru. I don't think you have competition with her. And the other woman in Daisuke's life is his relative, so we're fine. So, yeah, so basically we find out that Daisuke's company and Alvarez's company, they are intricately tied and they've done a lot of business with one another. They have a lot of assets traded between the two of them, right? And so that's when the one guy comes in. The one guy, like, as security is going through everything, the chef is there, and that's when the security guy says, oh, that looks tasty. And he's like, yeah, let me show you some. And he says, were you born there? And he says, yeah. Oh, what does he ask him there? He asks him, he says, this reminds me of the taste of Ragfan. And that, of course, is where the dam is going. So that should have been our hint that he's one of the indigenous people that's the actual terrorist. I thought it was the old man first. I thought the old man was going to come in and be a secret bad guy. But no, he ends up being the savior of the whole thing. And then so the cook had to die because the package with the bomb came to the wrong location. It came to the kitchen instead of where the guy wanted it to come. So he had to kill the cook because he knew too much. Imagine that. And then, yeah. So then we get to talking with the president. And the president says, my country has still many anachronistic people who are against development and hide behind tradition. In order to develop my nation without succumbing to the interference of such people, I most definitely need your assistance. So the Alvarez guy, it's kind of like anything else with this series. He's not everything that he seems, right? I'm sure he's still greedy and still pocketing everything, but he does he does seem to resent his country's hesitance at development. And that seems to be what he's trying to remedy, right? Is he's trying to like get some development going and wants Daisuke's assistance. And Daisuke's like, I'm just here to proxy for my grandma. And that's when things get interesting, because he's like, I'm just here to be a proxy for her. I'm not actually making any decisions. And he says, oh, you're going to pick up the torch for the Kanbei family though, right? And he says, no, there will not be a day where I succeed as head of the family. Wow, the buddy daddies comparisons just get deeper and deeper, don't they, Daisuke Ray? Because Daisuke is just there as a proxy for grandma, and he is not taking over the company. Which is fascinating to me, that he does not want to take over the company, because I thought he would. But I guess the money and stuff isn't what makes him happy, right? He's gonna learn the lesson that Haru is what makes him happy in the end, not the money. But that's interesting that he says he's not going to take over his head. There will never be a day when I succeed as head of the family. And the president's like, oh, is that so? So I don't know if he wants Suzui to take over as head of the family. That'd be kind of cool if he gave it all to her and was like, we're relatives, you take over the family business. And she's like, who, me? That would be interesting. I could see him doing that, but because it doesn't look like he has any relatives. And so then we have the bento boxes, which this scene was kind of sad. And this scene's kind of sad, and that's where the old man, they think that they ordered the food, and we find out that it actually went to the first division. So you kind of feel for the old man at first, and that's when she notices the star around his neck when she takes the bentos back. Yeah. So the whole thing with the bento boxes had to narratively happen so that she would stumble across the fact he has the copy of the key. But it instantly makes him look suspicious because he doesn't want to talk about why he has it. And then we find out later that he has it because he's been jacking off in the storage room, in the cellar, the evacuee location there. And so yeah, they decide that with the dam, their two families, the presidents and Kanbeis, are going to become more and more intricately tied. And then we find out that there's been a breach in security, and the one guy comes in and says that we have to move them to the safe room because they might be in danger. It was very well orchestrated. The entire thing was very well orchestrated. And if it hadn't been for the meddling kids, Haru and the meddling kids, he would have gotten away with it. But that was one thing, though. I guess the chief just wasn't, I guess whoever was planning this wasn't planning on Haru and them running into him, nor the spare key being discovered on the janitor. I guess they weren't banking on the janitor making the spare key. That honestly saved the entire thing, right? But yeah, if it hadn't been for the bento box going to them instead of the first division, a lot of this wouldn't have happened. So just a stroke of fate, right? A stroke of fate. And so they moved to the secure room. And then they talk about that as soon as they're ready, they'll enter the embassy. And that's when Haru notices that they have bomb squad gear on. And he's like, wait, what's going on? And of course, it's so frustrating because Hoshino knows that Haru is very capable of handling this situation. However, I think Hoshino doesn't talk to him for a reason. Like, there is a reason this stuff is kept from Haru, and I want to get back to it because Haru's just like, something's going on. But unlike episodes past, unlike episodes prior, Haru has been learning, and he's like, okay, I know I can't overstep my bounds, but we're just going to do what we can here. I'm not going to rush in until the one guy comes out, right? And that's when they get locked into the storage room, and we find out that the one guy, Ricardo, killed the cook. He's like, they're currently chasing the perpetrator, and then that's when Daisuke asks where the corpse was found. And then they're like, well, tell him. And he says, in the employee corridor near the kitchen. And Daisuke's like, okay, we need an image. We need to find out what this is. So I love that he uses the watch as a projector. And then we see Hoshino and the one guy with the cook. And they're sitting there taking notes. And he said there doesn't seem to be much blood staining the floor. After he was killed somewhere else. Was he transported here? And Hoshino's like, I don't know. I'm like, Hoshino, why are you shrugging? You're a detective, damn it. Answer him correctly. So, put Hoshino on here. Hoshino being not helpful. Because, yeah, the one guy's asking, like, well, shouldn't we, isn't this, like, kind of weird? Don't you think he was moved? And Hoshino's like, I don't know. I'm like, what do you mean you don't know? And that's when so there, something happens then, right? That's when the sound wave gets sent out from the van and it takes out the security cameras and everything. Yep, that's when it happens. And it's right next to the van, which is where the guy comes out to run from. So, yeah, the van set out the signal to cut communication. That's when that happens. And I love that Kamei cannot lift Haru up. That's actually hilarious. Kamei, like, tries to lift him up and fails miserably. He's like, no, never mind. And so then that's when they notice the one security. He's like, hurry up and stand up. And Kamei can't. And that's when the girl notices that there's a guy leaping from the roof. Yep. He's like, hey, you. And he takes off. This is the police. And Kamei's like, okay, I'll come. I love that the girl and the other guy, they're like, so he doesn't need us, right? Which is hilarious. But yeah, so they try to trace everything back. And I don't feel like the one guy was in on it, because he seems surprised that Ricardo killed the cook. But then about the time they figure all that out, that's when the radio signal jams the door and everything else, which is problematic, right? There's a radio jamming within 800 meters. And the president's like, what's going on? And Heish can't find anything to solve the problem. And Suzui's on her way, but then she gets stopped by the cat, right? And Daisuke is like, well, what the hell are we supposed to do? I am glad that Daisuke is resourceful enough to plan a way to defuse the bomb long enough for them to get out. Like, that wasn't nice, because I was like, you're not going to stop the bomb altogether. But he manages to stall it long enough where they can escape, right? I'm glad that ends up happening. And the episode is called If Money Be Not Thy Servant, It Will Be Thy Master. Which means that if you're not a slave to money, if you're not going to use money, it's going to use you. So that leads me to believe that there's some tricky stuff going on behind the scenes here. But Haru chases the one guy, Ricardo, up to the top of the building. They determine that he's the one that killed the chef, and then they go into the closet, and that's when they discover what was in the case, which is the gas bomb. And so I love that Haru he basically does the meme of, why are you running? Why are you running? And he's like, do you feel guilty about something? And that's when the guy says, tell me your situation. And Kamai's like, what the heck? And he says, those who try to sink my homeland under the dam will be in a locked room, unable to call for help, and drown in terror as they sink to their deaths. And the scary thing is that Haru didn't realize the significance of the key. He's like, why is he tossing that down into the drain? And then he leaps to his own death. Like, he was prepared to commit suicide, which is terrifying. But he did it because he didn't want his homeland to get drowned in the dam. Which, this show just went down the Buddy Daddy's route of not being scared to get gory. Like, the guy jumps off the roof and we see his dead body lying there. And we're like, okay. And that's when Haru realizes that Daisuke's in the room. So Kamai says, isn't this bad? He's like, what was that about? And he's like, the mass media will talk about overstepping boundaries during investigation and whatnot. And that's when he realizes where he is. So Kamai is talking about overstepping boundaries in the investigation with Ricardo. So Kamai is worried because Haru and them, they basically chased him down when they shouldn't have, and now he's jumped to his death, and Kamai is like, oh my god, the mass media is going to have a field day with this. What do we do? And Haru's like, oh, never mind. Daisuke's in the safe room. We got to go back. Contact Yumoto or Saiki. Okay, so Saiki is the girl and Yumoto is the guy. I will never remember that, but I will try my best. And then that's when he says that we can't get through because of the signal. I've been calling for a while, but can't get through. So he's like, well, let's go back then. And he's like, again? So, okay. The cartridge, the color is different from usual. And that's when they analyze it to know that it's like a nerve agent that could kill like thousands of people all at once. And that's when they find the letter that says basically, you know, this is your comeuppance for trying to destroy our people's lands, etc., right? And then poor Suzui, that damn white cat, ain't bad luck in this world. The white cat's bad luck instead of the black one. And she wrecks the bike, damn it. Making it 9 minutes until she gets there. At least she still came. Poor girl. Like, I'd get her to, like, the hospital immediately. Anytime you fall off a bike from an accident, that's not good, right? I hope she got some, like, first aid care after that. So, yeah. Meanwhile, they're all just sitting there, you know, Psyche and, oh, what's his face? I've already forgotten. Is sitting there, Kamumbo, or... They're sitting there drinking black coffee with the old man when Haru's like, what do we do? What about the guy you're chasing? And he's like, he died after throwing away some puzzling star-shaped thing. And that's when she's like, oh, this old man has one too. And the president's freaking out. And that's when Daisuke asks, how do I disarm this? And he says, I cannot answer that. He says, this is a product of one of our companies, isn't it? And he says, you are not authorized to access that information. So, things just got more interesting because even though Daisuke has access to the money, but he doesn't have access to all the family info, which gives me a very sneaky, dark vibe because I'm like, they've been building tanks in that lab and they've been building other things, and now we found out in this episode they've been building possible canister equipment that could be used as a terrorist weapon, as a biohazard. So I'm like, Daisuke, has your family been doing things that you didn't know about behind your back and you just aren't aware? How are they getting all these unlimited funds, may we ask? That is going to be the question. Like, are they getting all the funds through illegal means? That remains to be seen because Daisuke seems rather surprised by this. Like, oh, what do you mean I can't access the information? What I do like about it is they have a minute left, and Daisuke is like, I'm not going to worry about this now. We need to defuse this bomb, or at least try to save our skins for more than 10 seconds. And it says we're currently experiencing a powerful radio jamming around this embassy. Hoshino says this. I'm guessing it was intentional. Fortunately, the president and any other people who may be a terrorist target have evacuated into the panic room. Oh, okay. So they were like, well, crud, there could be a terrorist attack. They've jammed the signals. Thank goodness all of the targets are in the panic room, in the safe room. So it's like they think that they're in a good place. And he's like, in time, the IT team will identify the source of the radio jamming. And Takai, and then of course Takai is like, yeah. So I don't think Hoshino's in on it. I don't think Hoshino knows. I think that they're just thinking, oh, everything's fine. We'll just get them out of here after we've determined what the issue is. The chief, though, the chief for the 1st Division and the chief for the Modern Crimes Division, I don't trust them anymore, right? I don't trust them anymore because I think they're in on something. I think they had every intention of Daisuke and the president dying in this episode. I think they did. And then Haru got in the way. And I can just see that the chief Takai, him and Haru have kind of had like this father-son relationship. It's going to come to a head. And I can just see the chief being like, you don't need to get involved. And Haru's like, but I do. Because, yeah, then Haru shows up and he's like, you guys weren't requested here. And they're like, we have a problem. Kato's group. And he's like, Haru. And that's when, yeah, Suzui's like, Lord Daisuke. And he's trying, I love that he's just sitting there with his arms crossed, trying to like diffuse the gas and everything. And he goes to like try to smash things. And that's when Haru opening up the door like a damn savior. He's like, come on, Daisuke. I'm here to save you. And then Daisuke's like, get out. We've got to shut the door. It's about to blow. And he's like, oh yeah, let's close it. And then luckily they close it just in time. And they made it in the nick of time. Imagine that. And they're like, why'd the old janitor have the key? And he's like, you know. And then they even give us like a close-up. They think that she's like, she can't even repeat it out loud. She's like, because it's never used. He made a spare key and he's been using it for things he shouldn't have been. And they're like, by things you shouldn't have been, do you mean... And then in the closet, we find, yeah, like the dirty magazines and, oh my God, like the tissues and everything. What a dirty old man. But it was that saved their life. And I love Haru, like instantly, it barely cuts over, he looks over at Daisuke and he's like, I hope you're thankful. Because Daisuke handled that pretty well. He did not seem fazed by any of that. And Haru's like, I hope you're happy. Like, oh my God, it was so good. And Daisuke, he's like, why didn't you resolve it with Hesh? And that's when Suzui shows up. And she's just happy to see him. Yeah, so Daisuke has not told Haru yet that he didn't have access to the files, which I wonder how Haru's going to take that. And then Suzui shows up just in the nick of time, and they find this communication jamming equipment in the van. Interesting, right? And then the old man is there amongst the crowd, like it's all him. The Cho guy's the one that did it. They're in on it. There's a secret coup happening, I tell you. There's a secret coup happening. And then the project further exchanges with Japan and Alvarez leaves. Yep. And Haru's like, I don't quite understand what's going on. And they're like, oh, good work yesterday. Where's Kanbei? Like, who knows? And he's like, oh, that poison gas was pretty deadly, I hear. But that terrorist was planning on dying anyway, right? Yeah, I don't think he was going to stay alive to be interrogated. No. And so they talk about the gas during the signing ceremony, but no, it seems pretty official that they were just trying to kill Kanbei and the president. That was literally the only ones they wanted to kill. So Daisuke has a target on his head, which I don't like. And Haru seems to be contemplating what this all could mean. He says, why do you take the effort to lock them up in a panic room and kill him? And Haru says he wasn't intending to commit mass murder. I'm sure he just wanted to protect his homeland. He just wanted to kill the president and stop the transaction. Meanwhile, we go back to the case saying most of it's built in Polydor. However, the printed circuit board and the cartridges, among other parts, were made in Japan. There are a few companies that have technology like this. And he says, oh, like Mizuho Future Technologies. He's like, yeah, I'm surprised you know so much. They would be a likely bet, I think. And Daisuke's on to Cho. He's on that something is going on with Cho. Something's up. Something doesn't seem right. Something's not quite right. Something's rotten in the state of Denmark. Yes, indeed. Yes, indeed. And then it just cuts immediately as the man smiles to the costs of $317 million, which is, in comparison to what's been last, the first couple episodes, isn't too bad. But yeah. So, yeah, y'all, something is amiss. Something's up. I don't trust this Cho guy. I don't trust the leader of modern crimes, and I don't trust the chief of the 1st Division anymore. Nope, those three are out to maybe kill Daisuke possibly, and Alvarez, who may come back into this. There is some plots going on. People are being targeted, and Haru doesn't know yet, but Daisuke's onto it. What a great episode! I love that we're, if we go by the rule of 3, we always have your first act. Your first act sets up the characters, as it should. Just gives you the base things you need to know. And usually in a 12-episode series, that is episodes 1 through 4, which I think still holds true in this. The second act is your main conflict. Your conflict is established. And this episode definitely started that off because we've established several conflicts. One, we've established that Daisuke does not have access to everything despite supposedly having an unlimited balance. He doesn't have everything unlimited. which 2 could suggest that there are nefarious means of how that balance is unlimited, and Daisuke is just figuring this out. 3, we find out that he doesn't want to take over the company, so that's going to be a point of contention. And then 4, we have the possibility that maybe the First Division and the others likely have something to do with him possibly being targeted, along with President Alvarez or other individuals maybe as well. So that's a thing, right? So normally, in the final act, your second act usually goes for 5, 6, 7, and 8 to the 8th episode. And then your final act builds to your climax and resolution. And that's usually episodes 9 through 12. But in this case, we only have 11 episodes. So the question is going to be whether episode 8, I'm going to definitely say 5 through 7 is the conflict. The question is going to be, is episode 8, the rule of 8, y'all, is episode 8 going to be part of the second act, or is it going to start us into the third act? That is going to be the big question. The big question is the climax and finale going to take up 3 episodes or 4? Who knows? But I'm super excited now. I'm really excited to get this conflict started and see where this is going to build. Haru saving Daisuke was wonderful. I loved it. But y'all, I can't wait to hear your comments down below. I'm so curious to know your thoughts on this episode. But please no spoilers, hints, or clues. But I will talk to you very soon when we come back for episode 6 of The Millionaire Detective. Balance Unlimited.